Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our 2026 Shoemaker Lecture. I am Luis Ayala, the department head of our John and Willie Leon Family Department of Energy and Mineral Engineering. Before we begin our distinguished lecture, we would like to start today's program with the presentation of one of our alumni awards, recognizing an awardee who is unable to join us at tonight's banquet. But we are very proud of him, and we want to make sure that he takes this statue with him. So let me introduce the award first. The C. Drew Stahl Distinguished Achievement Award recognizes distinguished achievement in petroleum and natural gas engineering. This award was established by our faculty in 1997 to honor the 50-year career of C. Drew Stahl, an alumnus and legendary professor and mentor who inspired generations of students. The award recognizes petroleum and natural gas engineering leaders for the pursuit of excellence and for achievements which advance our profession. Kemal Anbarci is this year's award winner. I invite our awardee, Dr. Anbarci, to come forward, please, along with Dr. Arash Dahi-Talhani, our program chair of petroleum and natural gas engineering, who will introduce him and his accomplishments.
My pleasure. Good afternoon, everyone. We are pleased to recognize Dr. Kemal this afternoon. Kemal Anbarci served as the Managing Executive and General Manager of the Venture Capital at Chevron Technology Ventures, which is the longest running and continuously operating CVC in the energy sector. He has held this position since 2013. With almost 35 years at Chevron, Dr. Anbarci has held different positions, roles from engineering, technology, strategy, and commercialization function. He holds a bachelor degree in petroleum engineering from Middle East Technical University in Turkey, a master's degree in operation research, as well as master's and doctoral degree in petroleum and natural gas engineering from Penn State, and also an MBA from UC Irvine. Kemal is passionate also about advancing energy innovations and fostering a strategic partnership that shape the industry's future. We are proud to present Kemal with the 2026 C. Drew Stahl Award. And just for clarification, this is not baseball, this is the drilling part. Congratulations, thank you.
Thank you. This is very exciting. I have a speech. I promise it's 4 minutes or a little shorter, so no music probably needed. I thank the faculty, the department, College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, and Penn State for this extraordinary honor. I'm deeply grateful and truly humbled to receive C. Drew Stahl Distinguished Achievement Award. This award carries a special meaning because it not only recognizes individual achievement, as the faculty describe it, the award recognizes alumni who have demonstrated exceptional leadership, professionalism, and the pursuit of excellence within the petroleum engineering industry, mirroring Dr. Stahl's own illustrious career. That is an incredible high standard and the one that reflects the values Penn State instills in all of us. Dr. Stahl's legacy is inseparable from the lives he changed. Teaching was not simply something he did. Teaching was who he was. He cared deeply about the kids, and I was fortunate about one of the kids in 1986 in his class. Viewed teaching as an art form, spoke often the magic moment when a student finally grasps a difficult concept and the potential becomes visible. What strikes me most is that this spirit did not end with Dr. Stahl. It has been carried forward by the many faculty members, by the educators who follow in his footsteps in these buildings at Penn State every day. They change lives every day by holding students to high standards and believing deeply in what the students can achieve. I was fortunate enough to experience this firsthand during my studies here. I would like to acknowledge my advisor, Dr. Ertekin, who guided me during formative period of my life and my career. His mentorship reflected the very values Dr. Stahl embodied: intellectual rigor, integrity, generosity with time, and a genuine commitment to the students' development. Like Dr. Stahl, he taught not only technical fundamentals, but how to think, how to lead, and how to carry responsibility forward. I wouldn't be standing here today without that guidance. For the 40 years of journey that started here at Penn State. And the journeys gain meaning when you share with somebody. And my acknowledgement in my graduate thesis, the test that I was lucky enough to share that journey with then my girlfriend, Melanie, and now my 35 years wife, together here, and I have been very fortunate. Recently, I shared those feelings with a close friend. Dr. King actually knows him personally, who himself is a distinguished member in many ways, that I feel with this award a sense of imposter syndrome. I question whether I was truly deserving of the honor associated with such a legacy. My friend said, Kemal, don't see this recognition only as an award. See it as an assignment to give back even more. That perspective made all the difference for me. So today, I accept this wonderful award, not only with gratitude, but with purpose. I am proud to take on the additional duty you faculty have found me fit to carry. To mentor, to advise, and to further invest in others in the same spirit demonstrated by Dr. Stahl and by the educators who shaped me here at Penn State. Again, I want to thank the faculty for your confidence in me, to my mentors for your guidance, and to the students who remain, as Dr. Stahl believed, the heart of everything we do. Thank you.
Now back to our 2026. Please, Barb, take it away.
Since 1992, the G. Albert Shoemaker Lecture Series in Energy and Mineral Engineering has brought outstanding leaders in the energy and mineral resource industries to Penn State's University Park campus to discuss with students and faculty issues of great critical importance to the mineral industry. The inaugural Shoemaker Lecture was presented on April 3, 1992 by B.R. Bobby Brown, Chairman of the Board and President and Chief Executive Officer of Consolidation Coal Company. The Shoemaker Lecture Series was established by Myrtie Shoemaker, his wife, a real dynamo herself, to honor the memory of her husband. He was a Pittsburgh civic and industrial leader dedicated to the support of higher education, so it was only fitting. Al Shoemaker graduated from Penn State in 1923 with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and went on to have an eminent career in the mineral industries. After working as an engineer with Babcock & Wilcox, he joined Pittsburgh Coal Company, a predecessor of Consol Energy and now Core Natural Resources, where he worked for 35 years, retiring as president of the company in 1966. After retirement, he continued to consult with many companies that had interests in coal. He engaged in many civic and philanthropic activities, including serving on the boards of several corporate and nonprofit organizations. He was elected a distinguished alumnus of Penn State and served on the board of the Penn State Foundation for 10 years and as a member of the University Board of Trustees from 1957 to 1978, serving as board president from 1970 to 73. When I first spoke with this year's recipient of the Shoemaker Award, I had just reviewed her LinkedIn profile. It was clear to me that one of her passions is leadership. And so I proposed that we focus the lecture on leadership in the energy industry. Gretchen Watkins took it one step further, and she proposed our fireside chat. I'm sure you will agree that Gretchen's experience personifies leadership and that discussions of leadership are integral as we advance new technologies for energy and minerals. Gretchen is a seasoned global executive and board director with a 35-plus year track record of leading complex, high-performing organizations through transformation and growth. Known for operational excellence, she has built and led large, diverse teams across 6 countries, driving innovation, cultural exchange, and sustainable value creation across sectors including industrials, technology, and energy. As president of Shell USA and executive vice president of Global Shales, Gretchen drove operational turnaround and transformation across one of Shell's most complex portfolios. She led the U.S. Energy Transition Plan and saw a $10 billion Permian portfolio transition. She also spearheaded the deployment of AI, and of course here at Penn State, we're talking all about AI and digital technologies to optimize shale drilling programs and improve productivity across upstream operations. Her leadership extended to defining Shell's U.S. country strategy in rapidly growing AI, data centers, and natural gas markets, with a focus on digital innovation and new energy ecosystems. Gretchen is deeply experienced in global governance, having served on U.S. and FTSE listed boards, and understands both U.S. and European regulatory environments. She brings fluency in public policy, stakeholder management, capital allocation, and large-scale change leadership. You can read the rest of her bio in the program. So let's talk about leadership. Oh, I should mention that Gretchen is a Penn State Alumni Fellow from 2023 and has her BS in Mechanical Engineering from Penn State. So let's start our fireside chat. So we haven't done this format before. We typically have a lecture for the Shoemaker, but I think this could be interesting.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. So wanted to start early career. So was there an actual pivotal moment early in your career that really shaped your leadership philosophy?
I think when I look back, first of all, thank you all for being here, and huge congratulations to Kemal, who I just met right before this. In a small world moment, we both live in Houston, and we both know the same people in the energy industry in Houston. So anyway, it was nice to make that connection. And thank you, Barbara, for inviting me to be part of this and for agreeing to a fireside chat. Yeah, when I look back on my career, I think probably the very first big learning moment I had as a leader was probably my very first big leadership role. And that was a role I had just moved to the Netherlands, and my wonderful husband is here with me today, Jay. Jay and I had just moved to The Hague. I was running BP at the time, BP's offshore gas production business, onshore gas processing, and I had a sort of a 2-level promotion into this job, and I sort of thought, I'd better know everything I need to know when I go in, and it became pretty clear pretty fast that there was no way I could possibly know everything that I needed to know, and I really needed the people around me to help me. And so it was a fairly quick learning moment. It took me maybe a week to sort of attempt to think I knew things and realize I really didn't, and realize then that what I really needed was their help, and I needed to be very open about that. I need your help. I need your help. I can't possibly be an expert the way you are. Please help me. And in particular, I had an operations manager who I think was sort of standing there with his arms crossed going, how long is this one going to last? And I think once I opened myself up to asking him for help, we had a much different relationship going forward.
Okay. So, but we know that not everything always goes to plan. And are there leadership lessons that you learned when something didn't go right?
Yeah, I think, bringing it a little bit more forward, my career, I spent the first 18 years working for Amoco and then BP. BP bought Amoco. So fairly sizable company. And then I spent 10 years working for two more medium-sized companies. So first Marathon Oil and then Maersk Oil and Gas, based out of Copenhagen. And when I joined Shell, it was about 7 years ago. It was a pretty big and kind of an unusual thing to go from like big company to sort of more medium-sized company and then back to like colossal company, right? And big companies are kind of, I don't know this for sure, but I know enough people at Penn State that I think big companies are like big universities. The organizational structures are complicated. Sometimes accountabilities are murky. And so I was back in that kind of environment. And I still was thinking about change as something that I could do like I was in a more medium-sized company. And what I recognized was that wasn't going to happen. So I joined Shell, and you heard Barbara say I was both the president of Shell USA, but I was also running the Global Shales business. And I know I'm talking to a bunch of people who a lot of you probably know the shales business. And the shales business is not like deep water exploration. It is much more of a manufacturing process. But Shell is a world-class deep water company. And so they had taken all their world-class deep water stuff and thrown it at shales. And as you can imagine, it was totally burdened by a lot of expensive stuff that you do when you're drilling $2 million wells in deep water, and we were drilling less than $1 million wells over and over and over. So I could tell right away that we needed to sort of dismantle stuff. And so I sat the team down and I said, let's stop this, and let's stop this, and let's stop this. And everyone was like, yep, okay, great, we got it. And so went away, and I sort of thought, okay, that was easy. That was great. So a month went by, and the team's back together again. And of course, I talked to them, but I was hearing little rumors like, maybe this wasn't really working. So what had happened was they had stopped doing those, but they had sort of restarted it under the cover, under the cloak of darkness. They were still doing all this stuff, and I was like, all right, okay. So what I really needed to do was I really needed to sit and just take a breath and get to know all of these folks and really understand what is important to you, what makes you tick, what about your job do you love, and what about your job do you think could be done better and differently, and really enroll them in the change. And so, because I also had a team full of absolutely brilliant deep water people. And so, this is what they were doing what they knew how to do. But we actually sat down and went through that together. And did it take a little bit longer? Yes. But did it result in a much better outcome? Absolutely. So my first attempt lasted longer than a month. It was kind of 6 months of me going, why isn't this working? Why aren't they seeing it? And I was like, all right, we need a reset. Everyone needs to be sort of co-creating this. Yeah, I could go on, but that was a more recent learning for me.
Yeah, and that also ties into trying to bring the next generation of workers on. They have different ideas. what's their purpose, flexibility, inclusivity, those kinds of things. So how can energy and mineral companies actually attract and retain that kind of talent now in such a competitive landscape? Because we got to compete for the same people.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important question right now, because I can tell you, having spent 35 years in oil and gas, there are a lot of people that 35 years ago would jump at the chance to work for an oil and gas company that today would say, well, why would I want to do that? And I think the reason is because, and Jay and I have 3 kids, and they are clearly they're all in college or getting advanced degrees. They're very purpose-driven. Like, they want to know they're doing something meaningful and that it's going to make the world a better place, or a more fun place, or a safer place. And so I think, the energy industry and the minerals industry, actually what we do is really important. When I graduated from Penn State and went to New Orleans, Louisiana, to work for Amoco, I have to tell you, full transparency, I was not thinking about how purposeful my work was going to be. I was thinking about how cool it was going to be to get in a helicopter and fly offshore and work as a facilities engineer in the Gulf of Mexico, and I just was super excited about that opportunity. But as I worked in the industry more, it became really clear to me that energy is a vital part of our lives, and there's a lot of people in the world that don't have energy, or that don't have enough, or don't have stable energy, or they can't afford energy. And so having a stable and affordable supply of energy is important. I've found myself to be very connected to that purpose, and that is really why I stayed in this industry for 35 years, because I wanted to be part of creating a better future, and energy is one of those ways. And I talked to a few of you before the lecture. A lot of you are involved in critical minerals, mining also, right? I mean, we are looking at a energy transition that includes AI, it includes batteries, it includes all sorts of things that need critical minerals to be successful. And so I think for today's students coming out with degrees that are, and that are interested in being part of creating an exciting future, being part of sometimes bringing people out of poverty, being part of powering people's lives, I find that incredibly motivating. And I think all of us in this room are probably in some way connected to that, and making sure we are ambassadors for our fields, I think, is important.
Okay. So as you mentioned, we're having this energy transition, maybe expansion, with so much more electrification. And so metals, critical minerals, as you said, they're going to be as strategic as energy. So how could leaders navigate that convergence in all of this?
Yeah, I think, you talked about the energy transition, that we're in the middle of it right now. I don't have to tell this audience that. And I think it's something that is going to continue to provide opportunities, but also challenges for at least the next number of decades, right? And maybe even the next century, I don't know. But I think as leaders, our job is to stay in the conversation about that. And that means both keeping the flow of talent into our various disciplines, but it also means being involved in conversations with, for example, people that are setting policy. And I was just talking to Seth before this, we were talking about policy. Policy plays a huge role in the energy transition. And we've seen here in this country, quite a bit of policy change in the last few years. If you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, on how that's driving certain capital into certain energy spaces. It's far from perfect, but it's definitely changing the way this country is investing in energy. And I'm 100% sure that that's step one of many to come. And so the experts being involved in that conversation, I think, is super important, because we can play a role in driving that energy transition in a way that both reduces our environmental impact, reduces emissions, but also allows the things I talked about earlier, affordable, accessible, stable energy supplies for people.
So your bio talks a lot about automation, digital twins, AI, advanced geoscience tools. All of those things are sort of disrupting the energy and mineral industries. How can leaders then really help to foster that innovation? And, sometimes that might mean operational discipline goes away, but how can we keep that innovation moving?
Yeah, I think interesting point you made there about operational discipline, because I think the energy industry in particular, I think the mining industry also, we have a real commitment to safety, both process safety and personal safety. And I think for sure there's a tension in that space when you start, in various ways, when you start automating things, but also when you start thinking about removing the human decision point there. So I think that is as leaders something we need to be aware of, that tension. On one hand, automation, machine learning, AI can actually really vastly improve safety. It can take humans out of harm's way. It can allow us to see things that predict things that might happen in advance of them happening. It can, both be safer, more efficient, save money, reduce our footprint, all that good stuff. And for that reason, I think it is part of what we need to be doing is sort of fostering the environment where people can look at what the possibilities are, and understanding openly what the risks might be, but also pushing people to take those risks, and take the risks in a way that doesn't expose us to more safety risks or more environmental risks, but at the same time looks at ways of advancing us. So I think, AI, you said, that you're talking about it all the time. It is, everybody's talking about it all the time. And so I think I'm so inspired actually by being here at a university where I think AI is being used across all the disciplines, and we're looking at it not just, how can we do things faster, but how can we actually look at things we've never been able to look at? Or maybe there's, some of the things that we had at Shell are data sets that are so big that it would take, we weren't even sure how to interrogate all the data. And now we have opportunities to start looking at how can we use all of that data. So there's tremendous opportunity. Certainly there's risks, and I think just being eyes wide open about that is important.
So, there's all sorts of environmental things, as you mentioned, that we need to be, risk averse to. But that energy-water nexus, especially with electrification and all of these hyperscale data centers, that's going to be an issue. And so how can we navigate that challenge of water and energy?
Yeah, I think the whole dawn of data centers is a huge game changer for the U.S. in particular. It will be everywhere, but in the U.S., I've been focusing on it for the last few years while I was at Shell, and I think you have data centers, you've got a lot of companies reshoring manufacturing because of some of the tariffs that have come out, and so you're seeing an increased demand for electricity. I think you're going to continue to see, even though you read the EVs aren't they've sort of plateaued. I think people are going to continue to want EVs. I think that's going to continue to be, electrification is going to happen, and there's going to be more and more demand for electricity because of manufacturing, because of data centers. So I've heard all sorts of different predictions. You guys have probably heard, 10 times more, but like 30% in the next 20 years or next 10 years, 50%. I mean, it's going to be a lot. And there's a lot of pinch points that we're going to have to work through as we go there. But at the same time, there's, I don't think at all it's clear. There are a lot of puzzle pieces moving around. Who's going to own the generation? How much generation is going to be behind the meter? What are the contracts going to look like between generators and consumers, data centers, and the data center, the data that data centers are providing? So I'm super keen to see how all of that is just moving around very, very quickly. But to your point about water, that there is these data centers need to be super cooled, right? And so there is a ton of demand, not just for power, but for water. And so, one of the things that's, I think, we're going to see huge breakthroughs in innovation, not just in energy efficiencies. I think we're going to continue to see energy efficiency breakthroughs so that some of these 30 and 50% predictions probably won't come true, in my view. But we also have seen really cool technologies coming out of, for example, Shell, where they've developed an immersion cooling fluid where you can basically sink a whole data center into this fluid and you don't need water. You don't need cooling water anymore, which is actually, I had a chance to go see it. And it was amazing. This maybe isn't amazing to you guys, all these PhDs I was talking to before, but I mean, this data center I was in was like, I think, 3 football fields long, and they had taken one whole football field and put it into a tank that was like half the size of this half of the room, right? And so you can like squish it, like the footprint is really small, you don't need the cooling water. So we're going to see loads of those sorts of innovations, I think, coming as this demand continues to go up, and I think that's part of what's really exciting about it.
So we have quite a few students in here, as well as some of our professionals and faculty. But if you could challenge that next generation of leaders out here in energy and minerals to actually think differently, what would your message be?
I think, I talked to a couple of PhD students before this. One was talking about recycling solar panels, and another one about critical minerals. I think I would encourage you to get out and really be part of yes, we need research and academics, but go be part of an industry that's doing this stuff, because I think the more exposure our super smart people get to real industry challenges, the more that innovation is going to keep happening. And I think also the energy transition, all of you know it backwards and forwards, right? But there's a lot of people out there that don't feel part of that. And so I think those of us that work in that space, whether we're working in it from a producing energy, or looking at energy efficiencies, or looking at reducing environmental footprints, or looking at critical minerals and the applications they have, there's a lot. We can be ambassadors to the world for that. And the more people understand what the benefits can be, I think the better off we're going to be, as I'll just say, as a country. So back to the policy angle I brought up before. I'm happy to talk more about this if there's any questions. But one of the things I did when I was at Shell is I spent quite a bit of time in Washington, D.C., talking to policymakers, talking to the senators and the congressional representatives. And these guys, and I will tell you, as crazy some of the stuff that comes out of Washington, D.C. is, I always left that place more optimistic than when I got there, because there are a lot of people there really trying to do good work. But a lot of them don't really understand energy or critical minerals, and so part of what we can do is we can help educate them. And they want to pass good policy. They want to pass policy that's going to be better for businesses, bring more wealth to this country, make energy more affordable and accessible to people. You've heard AI talked about as a a national security imperative. I mean, there's a real drive to want to understand this, and I think getting involved in helping others understand it, we can all be part of that.
So I'd like to open the lecture up for questions from the audience. There's a microphone, an extra one there on this, on the stand that can go around. Questions at this point for Gretchen. Doesn't have to be on leadership, but. Yeah.
Is this working? Yes. I thank you for your thoughts and comments. Really appreciate that. And a lot of maturity and know-how in those brief comments, and there's a lot behind them. I wonder about, I'm going to talk about innovation, which you've talked around basically your whole campfire over there. And totally agree with your viewpoint that it's not independent of your basic systems, safety, environment, things like that. In fact, there's help build on and make sure it's done right. But some companies are better at innovating than others. Do you have any view why some companies succeed at this and some companies don't?
Yeah, I think I think it's very cultural, to be honest with you. So when I look at I've had the benefit of working for really 4 amazing companies, and they all had very different cultures. The cultures where I worked, the companies where I worked, where I think innovation was really at the front of what people did and how people worked, was less risk averse, it was more acceptable to fail at things. It was more acceptable to stop stuff. And people had broader accountabilities rather than narrower. And I'll tell you, my last company, Shell, which is a great company, I learned a ton. I worked with brilliant people, but the culture was quite risk averse. And I think you can go back to some big things that happened in the corporate history that caused a lot of process to be put in place to mitigate risk, which in a lot of cases is really good. And I've learned things around that I'm undoubtedly will use again in my career, whether it's through board work or advising or whatever, because they had some great risk mitigation processes and policies. But I do think if taken too far, people get worried about failing. People get worried about taking risks. And I also think, I'll just say a little bit more about that last bit. I think when you have people with broader accountabilities, it gives them the ability to connect dots across disciplines and across businesses that they wouldn't have if they're in a more narrow or functional role. And I've seen that play out in a couple places, and I think that makes a difference in innovation.
Other questions? Other question? Over here, Sarma has one.
Thank you very much. It was very, enlightening to hear for leadership. One thing I want to ask you, given that you work for several companies, if the university folks want to work with companies, and in your experience, what were the challenges that you faced in working with faculty or universities or in general, and how can we facilitate that more in this environment with all the tools that we have?
Yeah, could you guys hear that? I think. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure the mic will. Maybe you.
It's not functioning. I taught in this classroom several times. I can repeat this again. With her wide background or wonderful background in industrial perspective, how can industries work more closely with our institutes, like universities and so on, faculty? What are the impediments or difficulties that she faced, and how can we make sure that they want, they can be reduced, so to speak?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think the partnership between academia and industry is so important. And I'll tell you where I've seen it work really well, oftentimes is, and where I personally have found it to be super, super helpful, is when we need to speak with a different voice as an industry. So having an academic institution back up some things that that a company is saying is heard differently, particularly by like a policymaker, for example. So I'm talking policy here. And I had the opportunity actually to work with Seth and some other folks from Penn State when I was at Shell. And we were really looking, Shell has a big chemical plant outside of Pittsburgh, looking to bring the state in and help them with their sort of energy roadmap. And a company like Shell helping with an energy roadmap may look like it has, ulterior motives. And so having a partner like Penn State come in and say, no, actually, we agree with this, and we've got research to back it up, and really helpful. So that sort of partnership is very helpful. From a technical standpoint, I think where I've seen it also work very well is when there's been a conversation that the company says, we have a problem we can't solve, or we've been trying to solve it and we have this solution, but we don't think it's optimal yet. Can you help us? And so sometimes it's just yeah, we can help you. Sometimes it's hey, we've looked at this problem too, and we have a different solution. And let's sit down and work it together. And so I've seen that work very well. Where I have seen conflicts is occasionally I've seen universities come with something they want to prove. Like, we've got this thing and we really want to prove it. And the company's like, well, we don't want to do that. Like, that's not something that's super important to us. So I think it's very much a listening opportunity and finding some common ground. And then I've seen them work really brilliantly. Yeah.
All right, so, oops, too high, too loud. I'm a mining faculty here, but I work with a number of very large mining companies, but they are not as large as Shell or similar sized companies. In fact, one of my past employer, they were like a kind of spin-off or like abandoned child of a large petroleum company. Now, the petroleum company got rid of that mining company because of risk and safety and those type of things. So this question originates from what Ed asked and what you replied to that. So the taking risk is a culture maybe. And did you see something like larger companies are able to take risk and smaller are not, or it's the other way?
No, I don't. Yeah, risk is a really interesting topic, and you can come at it from a lot of different ways. You can talk about risk in capital allocation. You can talk about risk in terms of country risk, or above, shall we call it above ground risk in the geography where you are working. You can talk about safety risk. Putting people in harm's way. You can talk about environmental risk. What's your impact on the world, on the earth? And I think I don't actually believe there is a large company, small company issue there. I actually think it's more of a cultural, learned, and it's not even a behavior, but it's something that's built into the culture. And I've actually done, as a leader, I've done quite a bit of work on culture. I've done 2 big transformations, one at Shell and one in the Shales group that I was telling you about, and one at Maersk Oil when I was the CEO there. And making culture change is very tough work, but it's actually really rewarding. But it absolutely takes and back to, I gave that brief example about where I was trying to change things and everyone said, great, and no one really changed anything. I mean, it really takes a rolling up the sleeves of the leader, the most senior leader, really, and sitting down with people and asking, why aren't you taking more risks? Or why are you taking too many risks? And really getting a sense of what drives that. I feel like I'm under too much pressure, or I feel like if I fail, I'll get fired, and that kind of engagement from a CEO or a department head or whatever it might be is really needed to first understand what the culture is. Is it really risk averse, or is it like really risk taking? But then if you want to change it, it has to be, in my experience, very much co-created, that change. There needs to be a reason, a purpose, a mission. We want to take more risks because we feel like it's holding us back. We feel like we're not innovative enough. We want to take more risks. So then what does that look like? What does it look like when it's really successful? This is another thing I learned about culture is, risk-taking is a great cultural pillar. We want to take more risks. But then sit down and talk with your team about what that looks like when it's great. When it's great, it means we've spent some money on something we've been talking about for 10 years, and we've proven it works. Awesome. That's risk-taking at its finest. But what does it look like when it's not so good? Well, it probably looks like we've spent money on something that doesn't work. Okay, well, is that really a failure, or do you build into what is good is that you have 10 of those and the 11th works? Is that what risk-taking looks good? I don't know. But I would say that what's really bad about not taking risks is that you don't have innovation. You're status quo. Who wants to be status quo? Not many people. So I think it's a cultural thing. I don't think it's big companies take more risks or less risks. I think it's a cultural thing. And it's built on what people have learned is acceptable in that department or company or whatever it might be.
Maybe one more, Sergei?
Thank you very much for the views that you have presented. I think just about a minute ago you mentioned that it's not true that big companies do not want to adapt themselves to towards the new changes. I see the big companies as huge tankers. They have a tremendous moment of inertia. And so when you make the change, then you meet with some resistance. Yeah. And as a leader, how you can overcome that kind of resistance?
It's a great question. I like I told you, I joined Shell after 10 years at smaller companies, and when I joined Shell, I was the most senior person Shell had ever hired. So that tells you a little bit about Shell in terms of what their senior leadership looks like. Almost everyone of my peer group, excuse me, had sort of been born and raised in Shell. And so what I found was that change is really hard when you are working, when you're kind of a lone voice, if you will. So where I found change to be quite a bit easier and maybe even more acceptable was the company I worked before that, which was Maersk Oil and Gas. And Maersk was really unique in that there were about a third of the people there had been career Maersk people. About a third of them had joined kind of mid-career, and about a third of them had joined sort of late career. So there was a really interesting mix of people that had been dyed-in-the-wool Maersk, bled blue and white stars, but then a lot of people that had worked in other companies. And so it was funny because when I went to Shell, I'm like, oh, this is how Maersk did it. It wasn't because this is how Maersk did it. It was because someone from Shell joined Maersk and said, oh, we should do it this way, So it was just very acceptable to have someone at a table say, oh, when I was at Conoco or when I was at BP, we did this. We should have a look at that. And that was just how we worked there. And so we didn't have, occasionally people would say, well, that's not how you do things around here, but not very often. And so I think that resistance is harder to break through when you don't have people that come together that have sort of seen and done a lot of different things. I think that in my experience, it's a healthier environment to have some people that have, can provide that historical legacy. I've been here for my whole career. You need those people. They're super important. But then bringing in others at sort of mid-career and late career, that's really unique and helpful and can really drive innovation. It can drive, I think, a healthy view of risk-taking. So I've found that to be quite a good balance to that resistance. Back to your real question, like how do you deal with it? Well, it's hard. It's really hard. And one of the things I had to do was, back to that example I gave, I really had to meet people where they were and understand why things were happening the way they were. And just to give you an example, we had all these, in the shales business at Shell, we had all these councils, right? So we had like the production council, and we had the maintenance council, and we had the operations council. And I was like, I don't want a council. I want one person. I want an operations manager, I want a maintenance manager, and I want a production manager. And I don't want councils. Like, you can all have teams, but this is not a joint ownership, like we're all gonna negotiate. Like, there's gotta be a person. Well, the councils was so ingrained in how work got done that was the thing that 6 months later, I'm like, we still have councils. They're just calling them something different. Like, they're coming together. And so it's hard, and I had to really sit down and say, look, wouldn't it be cool if we only had one person in charge of and responsible for this, and you guys wouldn't have to spend all this time in these council meetings every week? Wouldn't that be cool? And so but it took a while, because for some people it was not cool. Like, they liked being on the council, and they liked coming every week and saying what they wanted to say and being part of a negotiation about what they were going to do on the production council. But in the end, it's not a good way to work, really. So it took a lot to break through that resistance.
Very cool. Yeah. So, thank you, Louise. So we do have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, and we're running to that now. So I want to have everyone thank Gretchen for being here today.
Thank you.
And then I have the great privilege to present her with the G. Albert Shoemaker Lecture Series in Mineral Engineering plaque to commemorate today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much, Barbara.
I think he's going to want to flip it around.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Gretchen's going to bug out in 5 minutes. So you're all dismissed. If maybe a couple people can come up and chat with her, but we need to get her moving as well. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you all for coming today, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.